Hey everyone! Today I'm interviewing Caitlin V, a renowned sex and relationship coach who's been practicing in the field and teaching others for the last 20 years. She has a wildly popular YouTube channel and is now the host of a new show on Discovery Plus called Good Sex, where she helps couples strengthen their intimacy, in part by watching them in the action and giving them feedback after, which I think is a fantastically unique idea. And I just want to say thanks to Caitlin for the great interview, and now over to her.
Thank you, Nick, so much for having me.
Of course. And, recently you did an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything on our subreddit dating advice. And I thought that went awesome. So today I figured, why don't I take some of the most burning questions my clients and specifically heterosexual men have asked me over the last 15 years and pick your brain so we can all learn a little something more.
Sounds great. I'm so happy to answer.
How do you tell a woman you're a virgin before sex? And should you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's start hot and heavy. There's a bit of this question, or rather a bit of this answer that's sort of a case-by-case basis, because I think it really depends on the kind of sex that you're preparing to have. Is this within a relationship? Is it a one-night stand? Is it like a casual hookup? Is it a friend? So you're aware as a man who's pre-sex, not had vaginal intercourse yet, that sex is going to happen. I think it depends on the future relationship that you want to have with this woman.
Sure.
Do you want to have a transparent communication, a relationship that's based on like honesty because that's an integral value of this relationship? Or is that detail like not necessarily important for the event that you're about to engage in? For me personally, I find that naming the thing that's on my mind and like clearing that from my space is really powerful. So, for example, yesterday I was working out with a new trainer, and I was really embarrassed because it's been like months since I got a really good workout in. And I was like, oh, they're going to know my body's like so weak right now. And like, I'm going to feel shame. And so I just made a commitment to myself that the first thing I was going to say to them when I got in is, hey, just so you know, I haven't worked out for real in a couple months. And I feel a lot of shame around that. And so I just want to let you know that's where I'm at right now. And the trainer said to me, well, do you feel like I'm going to shame you? And I said, no, I feel shame. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, is there anything you need from me? Great. So simple. But if I had gone through the whole workout going, oh my God, is he going to know my body's weak? Da, 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 I wouldn't have given him the information that he needed to train me so that he didn't, put everything up on the highest setting and give me the most weight, right? Like he kind of let me take it a little bit easier on my body because he had all the information that he needed to create the session for me. So depending on the woman that you're with, now this is a very skilled trainer, if you're with someone who maybe you're, isn't going to be a safe space for you to share that information. If you have any concern that maybe if you tell her that you've never had sex before, that she's going to laugh at you. And I don't mean like, of course you may have that concern, right? But you have to ask yourself, how much is that concern?
Which usually doesn't happen, right?
It doesn't happen. No. How much is that concern actually grounded in reality? Sure. Probably not very much, right? And I think that the fear that a lot of men have around being like found out as virgins is based on the expectation that we have of men that they're going to just perform in bed and that they're going to know exactly what to do and how to do it right away, every single time to every woman and just unlock her orgasms. And, men believe that that is the case. And a lot of women, unfortunately, have those expectations. But I think for the most part, the majority of women understand that we're not expecting men to perform with the same level of intensity that men are expecting themselves to perform right off the bat on their first time. If it was me and I was about to engage with a guy and he was like, I've never done this before, I'd probably be like, cool, like opportunity to try something and be a special part of this person's life and their story and their memories. And maybe you can create it like that. And then the other piece is once so you air that, it's no longer on your mind. You're no longer worried about it, right? She knows now the situation. So she has all the information that she needs to maybe like, especially if she's had sex before, maybe she can be a part of guiding you through that experience. She can ask that, what is it that you need from me to support you? And then, the last part is that if you're already following Nick or you're following me, or you're watching me on YouTube, like you may know more than guys who have had a lot of sex. Just because somebody's had a lot of sex does not make them
Totally.
a good lover. If you're studying and you're learning, like chances are that you're going to be a good lover, maybe
And even
better than
trying,
previous
just
lovers.
showing that you're trying to create a good experience, I think is a big piece to being a better lover, right?
Amen.
I mean, that's fantastic. So what I'm getting from it is it depends on what you actually want from the connection. Maybe if it's more casual, you don't need to address that as much. But if you want to own it, it can actually be quite powerful. It can set the right expectations for everybody and create a better experience.
Sure.
Cool. I love it. I love it. And I just want to comment that you said, the first times a lot of women aren't expecting that from you. I often tell a lot of my clients, like, women understand that the first few times that you guys have sex is not going to be your best sex. like they understand that, through and through. So I think that takes a lot of pressure off them.
Yeah, I think
Cool.
that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Is that for most couples, like no matter how old you are, how much sex you've had, the first several times that you have sex, you're just learning each other.
Absolutely.
So everyone knows it's going to get better. Yeah.
So let's say things are getting hot. How does he know that she's ready for sex?
Well, the easiest way to know is to ask her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that until you really know a person, until you have an established relationship with them, that you do need to ask, right? And we make such a big deal. People are so squirmy about like communicating, right? But I have a really clear rule in my coaching, which is if you can't talk about sex, you shouldn't be having it. Number one qualifier to being sexually active is being able to freaking talk about it. So what I would say is like, hey, I'd like to take this a little bit further. How would you feel about, and then whatever language seems the most authentic for you. Like, how would you feel about having sex? How would you feel about taking our intimacy to the next level and like, whatever, use your best Casanova, like, and like being close and inside of each other, whatever, like, whatever feels authentic to you. But I really don't think you have to dress it up that much. You could just say like, hey, this feels really, really good. And I'd like to take it a step further. Like, would it be okay for me to go down on you? Would it be okay for me to take off your pants? Would it be okay for me to play with you with my hand? Right? All really gradual moves. So your question was like, we're making out. So there's a lot of things between making out and like PIV intercourse, right?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
So ideally you'd be checking in every step of the way saying, is this okay? Are you into it? And then I would recommend if you're more, so there's two ways of looking at this. Some of us are looking for yeses and some of us are looking for nos, right? If you're a very shy guy, you're probably looking for nos because you're like very sensitive to being rejected. So you're looking for the rejection, right? You're like, oh my God, she like looked away and sneezed and therefore she doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. Like let that go and start looking for the yeses, right? So if she says, yeah, that feels great. That feels good. All ways of indicating yes. And you got to be honest with yourself, if you're the type of guy that's always looking for a yes, and she's like, maybe, and you're like, that was a yes, and she's like, okay, that's fine, and you're like, that's a yes, you need to be looking for the no's. Okay, if she says maybe, that's a no. If she says fine, that's a no, right? And I used to tell people to look for the no's, but the truth is a lot of the people who follow me, like the guys that make up my audience, are actually like really honorable, noble men, right? So they actually are very attuned to the no's. And sometimes it can be harder for them to hear the yeses. So know yourself well enough to know what you're looking for, right? I think it's yes. Only an enthusiastic yes is a yes. But moaning and groaning and pulling your hand and pulling your hips in and squeezing you and yanking you closer, like these are also yeses, right?
Definitely.
And then in terms of actual intercourse, I think this is really important to note. The female body, on average, and this is an average, takes about 20 minutes to be ready for penetration. And I think one of the biggest issues in sex across all generations today, but also especially true for younger people, and I'll say why in a second, is what I call premature penetration. It's penetrating before her body's ready. So she might say she's ready. Her mind and heart are ready, but her body isn't yet ready. And what happens is that when you penetrate before her body's totally ready, you actually can cause pain. And that pain over time can lead to a whole bunch of really negative health outcomes like vulvodynia and vaginismus. And what happens is, when someone like, if you try to like poke yourself in the eye, your eye automatically closes. You know, I have cats. So whenever I see a cat paw like coming near my eye, I'm like, it closes, right? This
Totally.
innate instinctive reaction that is evolved for us. So what happens is that if a woman is penetrated or someone with a vulva vagina is penetrated frequently too soon, the muscles in her pelvic floor begin to act like an eye. And so because they feel that this thing is going to hurt, they start automatically clenching. And so what happens is you end up with a situation where sex always hurts. So let me say this very, very clearly. Sex should never hurt. It should never hurt. Vaginal,
Absolutely.
oral, anal, it should never hurt. So if it does hurt, chances are good, especially if you are, younger, if you're maybe like under the age of 35 and it's hurting, one of the core reasons for that could be that you're penetrating too soon and you're not giving her the proper warm up. So the other way to know that she's like, her body's ready. So her mind's ready to have sex because she said it. Her heart's ready to have sex because she said it enthusiastically, right? She put emotion into it. And that her body's ready to have sex because the inside of her body is wet, relaxed. The outside of her body is engorged, puffy, darker in color. And those are the physical indications that her body's ready.
It's really, really important. What you said is that a lot of guys, I don't think, understand the disconnect from somebody being mentally ready and physiologically not being there. And bridging that understanding is super, super important. Which, by the way, that tied into my next point, which was how long should foreplay last? And you said roughly about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, of course, we want range, right? Like, I love a quickie.
Totally.
And let's give you that example too.
We've all seen 8 Mile. Okay. That's random old person reference. Oh my God.
So I grew up. Yeah. So I definitely saw 8 Mile. Eminem was like our hometown hero. Foreplay. So there's different kinds of foreplay. We have one of my favorite ways to distinguish these different kinds of foreplay is like, there's the foreplay that is like flirting. Right? So we often think of foreplay as manual, meaning hand, and oral, meaning mouth sex, right? And that's kind of the definition of foreplay, right? But what about the foreplay that takes place when you're out to dinner and you slide your hand on the inside of your date's thigh and say, I can't wait to get you home later? That's also foreplay, right? Because it's designed to arouse and stimulate. And so if we think about how long foreplay should last, that kind of flirtation foreplay, sexy text messages, sharing fantasies, making eyes across, like sneaking pinches and squeezes, that foreplay can last all afternoon, all evening, all date, all night. And then if, let's say you decide you're maybe at a house party at a friend's house with all adults present, and you're like, let's have a bathroom quickie, just for an example, right? You want to build up the excitement all night so that when you go into that private bathroom, that you are both physically ready to have quality sex. If you're at home, maybe you're in a marriage, maybe you've been together for like 10 or 15 years, your foreplay may actually take a little bit longer and it may be mostly physical in nature. It may be that hand and oral sex. Because when our bodies are a little bit more familiar with each other and when there's less sort of risk and excitement involved, it takes our bodies naturally a lot longer to warm up. So the calculation is like, how long have we been together? How stimulated are we? And are we doing like a mental foreplay and sending messages and eye contact? Or are we doing physical foreplay and we're doing we're arousing each other? And then one last thought on foreplay is that for most women in particular, but a lot of men too, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't make when we make a distinction between men and women, because it's really both. Foreplay really ideally doesn't start on the erogenous zones, meaning the zones that can have orgasms. It doesn't start on the genitals or the nipples. It actually starts all over the body. So start by like physically stimulating your partner with just gentle hands, waking up their entire body. It could be, if they don't like this kind of touch, like a light fingertip touch, maybe giving them squeezes, maybe giving them a massage, but stimulating and arousing every part of their body instead of just diving into the erogenous zones.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go another old person reference, which is like on Friends, where they draw a diagram and label each part of the body as a number, right? And the advice is like, don't always just go straight for it. right? Go around the body, warm up the
Right.
rest
She's
of
like
the
a 4,
body.
and then a 7, and a 3, and a 3,
Exactly,
and a 3. Yeah.
exactly.
That's
And
a great
I
quote.
think that's awesome. And I really, really love the idea of foreplay being something that can be much broader on the mental side. I call it having some foreplay for your foreplay sometimes,
I
right?
love that. Yeah,
That's
because we want to
awesome.
engage minds, hearts, and bodies. So much of what I teach is just about getting all three of those, because that's when sex is really, really good. Yeah, you can have physically great sex, and if your heart's not really in it and your mind isn't in it, like we all know what it's like to have an orgasm that's just like a sneeze. It's like it's satisfying in the way that a sneeze is satisfying, but it's not satisfying in the way of like an earthquake of pleasure that erupts from your genitals all the way to your brain. Like that's a different experience, right? You want to have those
Sure.
kinds of orgasmic experience, and you want to give those kinds of orgasmic experiences. If you're thinking as yourself as the giver, then you got to get head and heart and genitals all on the same page.
How important is sexual technique versus emotional connection in the moment?
I'm glad you asked. I'm laughing a little bit because I have 500,000 subscribers on YouTube where I teach a lot of sexual techniques, because that's what
Sure.
people really think that they need to learn, right? But you've pointed to the elephant in the room always, is that actually the emotional connection and the energetic connection between the two folks, and even the mental connection between the two people, is as important as any technique. One thing I
Hmm.
love to say, and you've probably heard me say it if you've been following me, is all of us descend from an unbroken chain of people who had sex, right? I mean, every single one of your
Sure.
ancestors has this thing in common. Some of them were lactose intolerant, some of them had diabetes, all of them had sex, you know? And so you actually, I think when you get your mind in, more important, because a lot of us are super mental. I'm very mental. I live up here. This is my comfort zone. The
Same.
heart is where we are, like, most of us are good at mind and genitals. We can get into either one of those, but like the connection between them is the heart. And that's weird for most of us. I mean, I didn't really start exploring what it felt like to like live and experience my own heart until I was already coaching. I was coaching and I was being coached, and one of my coaches was like, could you just drop your consciousness down 18 inches from your brain to your heart? And I was like, I don't think I know how to do that. And men even less so, right? Or it's this, we make it in our
For
cultures
sure.
okay for men
A
to
lot
do
of
that.
my clients especially really wrestle with kind of stepping into their heart and their vulnerability and emotions in those moments.
Exactly. It feels so unsafe for so many reasons, right? And so we do this in baby steps. But having had personally plenty of sex in all the different realms, I've had plenty of heart disconnected physical sex, and that's been great. But I've also had plenty of heart really connected, emotionally raw, vulnerable. And by the way, don't misread that to mean in a relationship. Okay.
Hmm.
Because you can have emotional, vulnerable sex with someone who you just met. It's not as easy as if you're in a relationship with someone you love them, but it's not impossible either. It really depends just on where you are with your own relationship to your heart, and how quickly and safely you can get into a vulnerable, raw space with another person, and how quickly and easily they can do that with you too. But to answer the core of your question, they're both important. Technique really is important. We cannot skip it. I would hate for you to like have a really beautiful, raw, emotional moment with someone and then like just like stab her pussy with your tongue, like that. I don't want that. Please don't do that. And I've been there. I've had really emotional connections, and someone like, looks away and they're just like trying to like erase my clitoris like off the planet. And I'm like, that's not it. We need technique, right? But they're both important.
That's great. I would agree too, and I'm glad that you relayed that, because I think especially a lot of guys I work with are really just focused on technique, and they think that like without the exact right technique or procedure, they're not going to be great at it. And it's like, no, if you could be present with someone, if you can be vulnerable, if you can communicate your feelings, all these things that are under your control and are all learnable as well, like that's what can make you a lot stronger in bed, or a lot
Totally.
closer with somebody.
And I like that
But
you
yeah,
said under your control, because you can't change the size of your body. You can't change,
exactly.
you can get erections or not, right? Like not all of those things are under your control. But by the way, Side note, if you really want to get excellent erections, those start in your brain and they really start in your emotional center. They do not start in your body. A lot of people really
Brain
have this
boners.
backwards. Hmm?
Sorry, I said
Brain
brain
boners.
boners.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
and even more so, it's not in your intellect. Your ability to get erect lives in your reptilian brain. You can't talk to it
Hmm.
with words, because if anything that you can't do to a reptile, like, it's out when you think about it. So it really has more to do with your physical. It has a lot to do with like it has less to do with your physical body. And that's, of course, if you don't have like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, like, if you have those things, then yes, it does have to do with your physical body. But if you find yourself not getting erect and you're an otherwise healthy person, physically healthy, then I can guarantee you 100% of the time, it has more to do with your heart, your emotional state than it does anything else. And when you have the courage to really look there and go there, you will find that erections and technique flow easily, because guess what? Every woman that you'll ever be with, I'm talking to my straight guys out there, needs to be made love to in a different way every time. Women's bodies are, by definition, always changing. It's the day before her period. It's the day that she's ovulating. Those are very different lovemaking styles, ideally. So if you get too hooked on technique and you're trying to deliver the same technique every single time, guess what? You are missing the opportunity to give her what she needs in the moment that she needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, you're kind of pulling yourself out of the moment, which often I find is what, again, causes a lot of guys to struggle to perform in the bedroom when they're really in their head and trying to be perfect. And am I messing this up? Am I blowing my chances? And they're really kind of disconnecting from themselves, right?
Yeah. Which, by the way, going back to the question of like being a virgin, if you clear that and you say it out loud, can you get out of your head now? That's why that would be the most important, to speak that.
I think that's always, and there's a lot of, I'm sure you know this, there's a lot of psychological studies that owning our own insecurities outwardly is quite empowering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And freeing, as long as it's within a safe environment. If a guy experiences like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation, how should he handle that convo? Especially with a new partner.
Yeah, because as it was, people who know me will know I really built my career on working on premature ejaculation and helping men to get beyond that. The answer is a little bit, it depends. I really think that for men with premature ejaculation, especially, it makes a lot of sense to name in advance, because you might need to do some things to manage your PE and last as long as you want in bed that other men she's been with maybe didn't do. But if you want to succeed and you want to be able to last, you got to do them, right? You're learning, because what I teach, eventually you don't have to do them anymore. But while you are overcoming your PE, there are some things that you might need to introduce into bed that will help you to last. And so because of that, you want to presence her and make her aware of that. Again, informed consent and giving her all the information that she needs before you go into sex itself. So one of the, especially if you're on the younger side, you may have a short refractory period, which means you can ejaculate back to back pretty quickly. If that's the case, and you know that you can just last a lot longer the second time, tell her, hey, sometimes when we start having sex, I may ejaculate a little sooner than I want, but just so you know, 10 or 15 minutes later, I'll be able to get another erection and go again. That way, if it happens, and it's a big if, right? I wouldn't say it's definitely going to happen, right? You say, like, if that happens, my request is just that we take a little break. I'll go down on you. I'll stimulate with my fingers, whatever. And then 10 or 15 minutes later, I'll be back in action and we can keep going, and I'll last longer the second time. I usually last longer the second time, right? She doesn't need perfection from you. What she needs from you is honesty, right? If that's not you, if you have a longer refractory period, then what you may say to her is, hey, just so you know, I'm working through and getting to a point where I can last as long as I want in bed. And because of that, there's a couple things that I'm going to need from you. If I say we need to slow down, I just need you to slow down, right? If I may request that we take a break. And then if you're, if you've bought any of my courses or you're familiar with my YouTube channel, you know that there's a bunch of techniques that I teach. Every guy's a little bit different, so you got to figure out which technique works best for you, but I have gajillions of them. So it may be, for example, for you, it may be, so I need to take like smooth and steady deep breaths sometimes while we're being intimate. I'm going to do my best to remain connected to you and do that. But like from time to time, I may just like close my eyes and take a deep breath. And just know that all I'm doing is making sure that I can last as long as I want in bed. And I think guys often get in their head like, I can't say that. Oh my God. What would it, yeah, I guarantee you can say that. Like 1000%
Absolutely.
guarantee she would rather you say that to her than that you ejaculate, go into a shame spiral, go cry in the bathroom. Like it is way more interesting and attractive for you to just be honest with her and tell her what you need. Most women are very eager to help you um, to have the best sexual experience that you can have, as well as the one that you can provide for them.
Yeah, it's I feel like you've probably dealt with this, but I've been fighting against those notions, especially in the bedroom for guys for a long time, where it's like communicating these moments of where you feel insecure, where you need to set the expectations, actually makes you, one, more confident as a person, like appear more confident as long as you present it. You're not just, like you said, sitting in a shame spiral and, crying. Okay. But two, then a lot of women are really understanding and compassionate. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand there's a lot of terrible advice out there right now. That's like, if you tell a woman anything like that, women are just heartless. They're immediately disgusted by you and like you're screwed forever. And it's like, I don't know where they get this. And they kind of get in this cycle where they don't talk to women about it. Then they just hold it in, and they have this story in their head. And it's like, just talk about it, man. And if it's the right woman who wants to have a good experience with you and is empathetic to that, like, she's going to be cool with it. Whenever I've had any situation about any kind in intimacy and I've communicated that, I have yet to see a woman shame me, get really upset, or make me feel like a terrible person.
Mm-hmm. And remember, it's just, we're practicing. You're not going to get this communication perfect every single time, or let alone, the first time. And like, so what? Part of the human experience is that we're imperfect and we're practicing communicating. We're practicing being transparent. We're practicing being honest. And that's all we can do. So let yourself get it like 80% right and consider that a huge win. And then go back the next time and you'll improve a little bit.
I love that. 80% right. That's what I'm going to tell some of my clients. You don't need to get 100% right. Just 80% there, you're fine.
80% is great.
What's one really important piece of advice for giving oral sex?
Okay, this is a great question. I would say that this advice applies to sex in general, which is the way that you want to be touched is not the way your partner wants to be touched. This is difficult. I've been learning this I'm learning it, right? Because we just so default to what we prefer. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just how you have to recognize that that's how you operate. Most of us operate. And since most men have a relationship with their penises where they like a lot of stimulation, I think a lot of that has to do with the way that they learn how to masturbate, because we don't have self-pleasure education, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of guys figure out how to jerk off with no lube, no lotion, while they're watching porn, stranglehold, death grip. And so what happens is that you're desensitizing yourself. And the same is true for porn. You're also desensitizing yourself for watching porn. Now, I'm not against porn as a whole, but what I am against is always relying on porn for your erotic stimulation. Because guess what? That would be like always relying on McDonald's to feed you instead of ever learning how to make your own food. Okay. You can survive. You can survive, like you will live. Quality of life questionable, but you won't die, right? You could totally live on McNuggets. Somebody did that, that would be Super Size Me.
The documentary, yeah.
Right. But if you watch Super Size Me, you'll recognize that like maybe that wasn't the best thing he could have done for his health. Same is true for porn. If you were relying on porn all of the time, you were going to end up having, whatever the sexual equivalent of like painstakingly high cholesterol diabetes is, right? Which is often delayed ejaculation and an inability to reach orgasm with a woman, which is often, I call it porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is that you can't even get hard because you can only get hard with porn. So if you have any question about your relationship with porn, take a break from it. Get back into right relationship. Take 90 days off. And if you find yourself really spinning out, great. That's pointing to exactly what you need to look at, maybe with the help of a therapist or a coach or, with a men's group, but don't do it alone, right? If you're looking at porn because that de-stresses you, because that's the only way that you deal with the stress of your life, like maybe come up with some other ways that you can de-stress, right? Because you really want, ideally, your sexuality and your eroticism is separate from your stress life right? Sex life and stress life ought to be separated. And if you find that they're like too overlapped, or it's your sex life and anything are too overlapped and intertwined, it's time to break free of that. Just like it was an addiction, treat it that way, and treat it seriously if it's serious for you. I don't remember the question.
No problem. I
Oh,
guess
you
I'll
asked
just
about
comment.
oral sex. I'll get back
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I've got it. Okay, go ahead.
No sweat. I
I
was just
remember.
gonna say I'm the same way. I'm not anti-porn by any means. I think in life, most things in moderation, if you can moderate. But I would say that I think most guys that I know could benefit from some times in their life where they have a little bit of, like you said, a period where they go without it or they minimize their consumption. Because what a lot of people talk about, as well as yourself, is like the obvious performance issues in the bedroom. But with a lot of my clients where they're trying to meet people and go on dates and show their interest and step into their sexuality, something I don't hear people talk about is also like the loss of a drive to do that, right? They watch porn, they expend themselves, and then they're like, I don't have any energy to go meet people. I don't want to go on this date. I don't want to show up. And so I think there's a big conversation that also needs to happen of where, we're seeing the rise of a lot of guys that have never had sex over the last year. It's the highest reported rates ever. And I think a lot of that is you watch some porn, you finish, and you're like, I'm satisfied for the next X amount of days. So I don't need to go fulfill that with a real person.
And I was just trying to look up, there's a great tweet from Andrew Huberman where he just kind of brings this into two sentences. Narrowing, addiction is a narrowing of the things that make you happy. And happiness really results from an expansion of the things that make you happy. And it all has to do with dopamine. So dopamine is a neurochemical. It is, we could shorthand it by saying it's the chemical that is associated with drive, desire, and satisfaction inside of your brain. Dopamine, people really kind of misunderstand what it does. Dopamine is the thing when you drive by, come back to a burger example, when you see a picture of like a juicy burger and you're like, oh, I want that. That's dopamine. Dopamine is the drive to go get the thing. When you actually eat the burger, when you satisfy that urge, you get the biggest hit, right? Feels good to have that urge be satisfied. Well, porn is very, very, very good at satisfying and supplying your brain with dopamine. But what happens is the more that you narrow focus on porn and the more dopamine that you get over and over and over again from this one source, the less joy and satisfaction you will find from other sources. And so the secret to happiness is very much altering how you get your dopamine hit, where you get the drive and the desire and the satisfaction of having that thing that you desire, like the accomplishment of it. Also, Andrew Huberman, phenomenal neuroscientist, says that making sure that the dopamine hit that you get is scaled to the effort that it took to get it. So turning porn on your cell phone and jerking off, very, very easy, very low effort, high dopamine, right? So it's not really scaled, right? It's actually pretty much out of balance. Driving to a park and taking a hike, lots of effort, not as much dopamine, right? But it's scaled. So you have to, for your own well-being and for your own longevity, to make sure that you're varying how you're getting your dopamine hits. It's not just always porn, and that you're scaling. And so a great example of that is like going on a date with someone, really big effort, maybe very low dopamine payoff, maybe very high. I mean, if you have a great date and you have a great connection, really authentic, you end up having sex, like, the dopamine actually could be enormous, but chances are good that it's going to be a little bit lower than that on the average date, right? Remember, it's a numbers game. As I said in the AMA on Reddit, like, we got to remember, we got to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying.
Especially online dates from first dates,
1000%. Yeah. So should I go back and answer the oral sex question?
Yeah. I mean, you can keep it brief if that's easy. It's like, maybe what's one good thing that they should keep in mind?
If I could really give you one thing, I would say freaking ask. Just ask. How do you, and don't accept, I don't know, whatever as an answer. Because in one tradition that I subscribe to, there are 9 different types of clitorises and vulvas, at least, right? We could break them down. There's also different ways of looking at it. Like you could say hooded and unhooded. You could break down clitorises into just 2 different categories. You could break them down into 9 different categories. You could break them down into, roughly 4 billion categories, right? Because there's probably each person's is unique to them. But at a minimum, say you've had a lover, say you had a girlfriend for 3 or 4 years, maybe in high school, and this is how you learned how to do oral sex. You got really good at oral sex on her, right? And then you break up, you go to college, whatever. The first you go down on her, it doesn't work on her. Second girl, it doesn't work on her. It doesn't work on her. Well, yeah, it doesn't work on her because all of them are different. And, if she has a hooded clitoris, you have to approach it in one way. If she has an unhooded clitoris, you got to approach it in a totally different way. So ask a lot of questions and don't let your ego get in the way. Don't think you know, because you don't know until you do. So ask and be humble and have a beginner's mind with each new lover of like, I get to figure out how to please this body.
I think it's really cool that everything comes back in large part to just open communication, and the counterintuitive thought for a lot of guys of like, that makes me seem unknowledgeable or insufficient, when it's the opposite. It will make you more connected, more understanding of each other, and create a better experience.
And more likely to get laid again with this person, instead of like
Which is
stumbling
nice.
around. We're like stumbling around in the dark looking for a light switch when there's someone right there who could just tell us where it is.
Exactly. And so, and in turn, I love that analogy. If a guy is working on a woman and he can't make her orgasm, does that make him a bad lover?
Yes. Next question. No, I'm playing. Obviously not.
I mean, yeah, I saw about 1 million guys' hearts just go, ah.
Yep. Nope. You're a bad lover. You should stop trying. No, of course not. And one thing that I say, also controversial opinion, is that everyone's responsible for their own orgasm. So I am responsible for my orgasm, whether I'm alone, with a partner, at a party, whatever. I am responsible for getting my orgasm. And so we can go to get that result in a bajillion different ways, right? But I think communication goes both ways, right? Just as men have a burden of communication in a heterosexual coupling, so do women, right? And so her responsibility is to tell you what she needs to get off, or failing that, to get herself off, right? To say, you know what, actually, like, I really need to bring in my toy. I need to bring in my vibrator. Okay. Like, guys, it's your responsibility not to shame her for that. Plenty of women only are able to get to orgasm through stimulation that is as strong as what a vibrator can do. It's not your competition. It's your friend. It's a tool. Just like you want to have a toolbox with hammers and screwdrivers and all that. Like, guess what? Vibrators are another tool, and you're going to want to bring them in your toolbox if you want to get the outcome that you're trying to create.
Wait, just not a literal. Don't like bring a literal craftsman with toys to the bedroom.
I actually wouldn't mind that at all personally, but I get it. I'm a professional. So if someone shows up with like a duffel bag full of sex toys, I'm like, show me what you got. Like, what do we, but I have drawers.
It's like Halloween.
Yeah. Halloween's like my favorite holiday for that reason. Yeah, you can show up as a handyman and a pizza boy and a pool boy. And, yeah, it's great. And okay, so number one, her orgasm is her responsibility. Your responsibility is to ask all of the questions and be open to all of the answers on how to help her get there. Your responsibility, as Dan Savage says, is to be GGG, good, giving, and game. Attempt to be good at sex, be giving, be, and it's usually not a problem for men, but sometimes, like, be giving to your lover, and then game for anything that's not a hard no for you, right? Like, if your partner wants to be tied up or blindfolded or something like that, like, can you be game to try those things? Good, giving, and game. After that, it's all just about being open to communicating and to receiving that communication. So ask her for what she needs. Ask her to show you. Ask her to describe to you what she needs and how she needs it. And then be willing to receive that, not as a criticism of you, but as a map. You would not show up to a new city and expect to understand how to get around without a map, right? And you'd be pretty upset if that city refused to provide you a map and was just like, I don't know, figure it out. Like, dinner's at 8, try, that's not cool. So ask and request that she answer. A lot of women have an experience of it really not being safe to tell men how to make love to them, because maybe her previous partners or boyfriends really didn't take feedback very well.
Yeah.
So to the best of your ability, be safe to receive her answers and tell her that, like, you're here to be GGG, but she's got to let you know how she's got to be a part of helping you to get her there. So no, you're not a bad lover. She's got to communicate too.
I really like the idea of just, being quite open about, hey, this is what I need to understand. Like, being open to her telling you what she needs, not taking that as a deficiency on yourself. And like, I call it unleashing the beast. Like you said, so many women have been shamed when they say, I need a toy or I need some other stimulation. And a guy has been like pouty or upset or even like intense. And if you show the opposite, that's where a woman starts to, in my experience, trust you, be vulnerable,
Mhm.
and really start to step into her sexuality. So like you're missing out
Mhm.
on in fantastic sex if you create that
Mhm.
safe space, you know?
Yeah, because
Uh,
we'll go back to the reptilian brain briefly. In order to have a really powerful arousal and orgasmic experience, you actually have to feel safe. This makes a
mm,
lot of sense because you know how when you go to sleep in a hotel room, you don't sleep as well, at least not the first couple nights, because a part of your
definitely.
brain is keeping you awake because it's an unfamiliar setting. It's just, we evolved this way. It actually helped us to survive, right? We were in an unsafe place, a little part of our brain stays awake. Same is true with sex. Okay. Again, if anything that a reptile does, we do too. Sleep, eat, poop, sex, breathe. That's all us also. Okay. And so we got to look past, we have these like gorgeous, really, stupid though, human brains that just want to answer everything through the human lens. But like, we got to go all the way back to the reptilian lens, especially for sex and mating, because that's where the majority of that hardware lives, all the way at the brainstem. So in order to have a great orgasm, you actually need to feel all of the way safe, just like the same way you need, if you want to have a great night's sleep, you got to feel all the way safe. It just comes down to your nervous system. So we have two nervous systems for the purposes of our conversation right now. We have our fight and flight nervous system. That's the part that keeps us awake at night. And then we have the rest and digest nervous system. That's the part that allows us to sleep and orgasm. So the safer that a woman feels with you, the bigger and better her orgasms will be, the more bombastic her sex will be. And again, I think when you said unleashing the beast, you're talking about inside of her, right?
Yeah, exactly. Her stepping into her true sexual person with you.
For sure. I personally believe, and one of the reasons that I don't that maybe I don't coach women so publicly is because I personally really believe that inside of every woman is like a enormous, like sexually devourous potential, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to hear that. A lot of men don't want to hear that, by the way, right? Because it's scary, right? To think about, is she sexually more powerful or more voracious than I am? What if I really let her out? Am I not going to be able to please her? It's that masculine scar of am I not enough? Right? What if her sexual beast comes out and then it reveals that I'm actually not enough? Well,
Hmm.
guess what? Better to find out what's actually hidden behind the curtain than live in fear of a woman's power.
Plus, trust us, you want to see what's behind the curtain is a lot
You
more
do.
fun.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. All those things that you kind of want, they all exist behind it. All the things that you saw in porn, you're like, that would be pretty hot. That's all behind the curtain.
Totally. And I want to move on for you just with my final questions, but I'll say like, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think that's that controversial, maybe in the mainstream space, or the main space. I agree. I think there is a very sexual, powerful person in every woman. And your job is not only to stimulate and do technique, but to create a safe space, create open dialogue. And that's where you're actually going to see it.
I do want to
And
make
yeah,
one addition to that,
please.
which is I do want to leave space for asexual people because there
Of
are a
course.
portion of the population of women and of men and of non-binary folks that identifies as asexual or gray sexual or ace. And these are folks for whom they do not feel sexual desire. They do not have a drive to have sexual satisfaction. So there are also people who are aromantic. They don't have romantic desires. They don't want to be in romantic partnerships, right? And I think it's really important to appreciate that some women have lack any sexual desire, and it's not because you haven't done something right. It's not because you haven't unleashed them. It's not because you have the right technique or your heart isn't aligned or whatever. It may just be, or because they have sexual trauma or because they have pain with sex. Like there's a portion of the population that does not experience sexual desire at all because they are asexual or gray sexual.
Hmm.
And and a lot of people don't know this because people, and I'm fully responsible of leaving them out of and letting them be invisible in a lot of conversations. There is a chance that you or your partner is just asexual. If sex isn't happening easily and they don't seem to want it, look into that and see maybe if that's who they are. And, if you're a very sexual person, does it work for you to be in the relationship as it is, trying to get this asexual person to want sex, or do you have to come up with something different?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the open communication you talk about will bring that to a head, right?
Mhm.
Because then if you guys actually talk about it, then it's like, hey, I don't have these normal drives. I've always felt this way. It clears up a lot of misunderstandings.
100%.
What's a really common mistake you see guys make with new partners?
I would go back again to just not asking, just assuming that they need to know or that they have to know. The other piece is, I think that men make the mistake of having sex before they're ready.
Hmm.
I think a lot of men have this story, and this could be, I'm a little bit biased because of the people who I'm working with in my one-on-one coaching practice right now. This keeps coming up. You don't have to be a constant always yes to sex as a man, right? And you don't always have to be pursuing sex either. You also get to have preferences and say no. And I think a lot of guys put a lot of pressure on themselves, especially with new partners, that they've got to want sex, get sex, perform sex. And like, if you're not ready yet, or it doesn't feel totally right for you, like you get to say that, and you get to say, hey, I am really attracted to you and I'm feeling like this great connection happening between us. And like, I really want to preserve that. Here's what I'm available for. Here's what I'm not available. I'm available for flirting. I'm available for sexting. I'm not available for intercourse yet, because that would be inauthentic to me. You don't have to say anything more than that. So take that pressure off of yourself.
I think that's pretty hot to a lot of women, actually. I'm probably biased there too. A lot of my clients wrestle with that as well. And they're afraid, like, if I'm not constantly showing that I'm gunning for it, I'm going to lose that person. And I think that as long as you communicate it in the way that you did, and still say, I'm attracted to you, I feel something here, I want to move this forward in some sense, but I have this boundary or this need to hold off. Like, that's the best of both worlds. You're still not pretending like I'm completely platonic and I'm not interested.
Right.
So the person knows that you feel it and knows that there's that intention there, but then just understands, cool, this person's not ready. And sometimes, like I said, that can be quite hot, where she's like, the anticipation is building.
Yes. And someone asked about this in the AMA that we did on Reddit. So if this is interesting to you, definitely go check that out. But one of the schools that I teach and am certified in is the erotic blueprints. And one of the erotic blueprints is the energetic blueprint. And just in short, this is someone who's aroused by tease and anticipation and the energy between people, like the emotional, energetic space between them, the connection between them has to be really strong and feel safe for you to want to engage sexually. And there are a lot of energetic men out there. There's a lot of men with the energetic blueprint who need these things and want a lot of anticipation and tease before, and they need that connection to be in place before they can really experience sex. And so what they end up doing is they end up violating their own boundaries and engaging in sex that doesn't feel right for them because they think that they are supposed to. But if you, and I have I did a whole YouTube video series on the on the energetic blueprint and on all of the erotic blueprints. So check that out. We'll give you a ton of baseline information for how to approach any lovership situation, whether it's a one-night stand or a romantic partnership. But in short, if you identify that way and you need that kind of connection first, and you are familiar and you can describe that and you can articulate it to her, here are the things that I really need in order to feel totally erotically and sexually open and available. She will love that you know that about yourself and that you're able to articulate it. That is hot.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And by the way, we will link to the AMA in the comments or in the description. So if you guys want to check that out, we highly recommend that as well. There's a lot of great answers there. Mm-hmm. That leaves us with our final question. And so maybe in short, can you tell us, what do you think makes a man a good lover?
So I'm going to give this answer today, but I would maybe give you a different answer yesterday and a different one tomorrow. But in this moment, in order to not repeat anything that I've said, what I will say is being prepared. So, and being knowledgeable. I'll give you an example. I once had a lover. We were camping, and it was a new lover that I met while we were at a festival. We're all camping, right? And I went back to his tent with him, and he immediately got out like hand sanitizer and started washing and scrubbing his hands. Okay. How many of us would think to do that? Even I, as a sex expert, even at the time, would have
That
probably thought about it eventually. But the fact that he thought about it first and he thought about it immediately was such a turn on to me, because it let me know that he knew, he had taken the freaking time to learn. And maybe he learned by experience. Maybe he learned because he caused a nasty bacterial vaginosis or yeast infection or whatever, right? Like
sure.
the vagina and vulva are so sensitive to dirt and bacteria. And like, you should always 100% of the time, whether you're camping or not, wash your hands before you touch a vulva. But the fact that I didn't have to explain that to him and he knew that about my body was so hot to me. And so we can extrapolate that example 1,000 times over. Being prepared by knowing what questions you're going to ask, being prepared by being able to speak, hey, here are my boundaries, my limitations. Hey, sometimes I deal with PE, premature ejaculation. Hey, sometimes I can't get it up. Sometimes whatever. Like, the level of preparedness that you bring into a sexual encounter is what I think makes you a great lover. It is not technique. It is not your ability to hold unbroken eye contact. It's not having familiarity with your energy body or the tantras, or it's not being able to tie a woman up or give a great spanking. It's none of that. It's just how prepared you are to have a physically and emotionally intimate encounter with the person across from you.
I love that. So then how do guys get prepared? Where do they find you? Where do they find your advice? And how can they learn from you?
Yeah, thank you. So I mostly live on YouTube. You can look me up at YouTube, Caitlin V, CAITLIN V. But honestly, if you spell my name in any kind of way, you'll find me, because enough people have before. You can also find me at CaitlinVNeal.com. I have a men's coaching group. So if you're interested in working with me, I have a membership of powerful men's called High Performance Male. That's where I spend most of my time, is working with my guys in that group format. I do one-on-one coaching, and I have a bunch of courses for premature ejaculation, for being an epic lover, for communicating. I have 2 courses that are strictly on communication. The one I'd recommend, if you liked what I had to say here and you want to get better at communicating, is called Epic Relationship. You can find all of that on my website. And if you just want to see more of my educational content, find me on YouTube. And I think there's like 300 plus videos for you to dive into there.
Awesome. And check out your show, because it's
Oh
pretty
yeah,
great.
and check out Good Sex on Discovery Plus. You can get a 1-week free trial. Thank you. Yeah, and I have a whole TV
Of
show that
course.
you also could watch.
Oh, thank you so much for staying on and answering these questions so thoroughly. This was an incredible amount of value. I hope you guys loved it. I learned a lot. And yeah, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Nick. Anytime.
You too.